You know, some things are just hard to explain, and they're better understood through experience. So let's start there. What we see here are pedals handmade in Wisconsin by Mattoverse Electronics. And when I say handmade, I mean by one man's hands. Matt's hands, of course. I'm always impressed and inspired by handmade goods. And it raises the bar to the next level when I see a single person designing, engineering, and manufacturing and shipping individual pedals out. I'm always inspired by dedicated and talented people who take the risk to invent something and share it with the world. Before we take a closer look at these pedals, I just want to add that we need more people like this, and I think it's worth supporting individuals and businesses like this. So let's take a look at some of the offerings from Mattoverse Electronics. In this setup here, I wanted to see what would happen if we daisy-chained all these pedals together. So far, we've proved that technically you don't need a guitar or other instrument to experiment with them. And we can create something interesting with just a few pedals. That's because a few of these pedals generate sound on their own, and you can run them into each other for more sound sculpting. So let's explore each one. First up is our favorite, the Analog Kick Drum Mark II. This may look like a typical effects pedal, but it's actually an analog synth meant for foot use. In other words, you tap along with your foot, making a beat. The momentary foot switch triggers an oscillator to generate a kick sound, and there are parameter knobs to adjust decay, pitch, distortion, and volume of the oscillator. This device and a looper pedal could be a fun combo to try, but that's not the only way to use this pedal. That's because this pedal has a sync input, and if we wanted to, we could trigger this with a sequencer that has a gate output. An update to the Mark II version of the Analog Kick Drum included a 5-volt trigger input, which allows us to trigger the pedal externally. So let's do that. We have the SYNTH Deluge here, which has been set to a 5-volt gate output. Connect an 1/8 inch to 1/8 inch cable between the gate of the sequencer and that of the pedal. This pedal has a 1/4 inch input and output. The input is a pass-through, so you can put this in line with another instrument signal like a guitar or bass, and both signals come out of the Analog Kick Drum pedal. And here, we're routing the output of the analog kick back into the Deluge's input, but you can connect it to an amp or a PA that can handle all this crazy bass. With a simple beat playing on the sequencer, we can now trigger this kick drum with whatever pattern we want, and we can adjust the parameters of the synth. This little thing is great. Now we can sample it, we can use it in a live performance. It's a handy little device, and it's worth checking out. Now, the Analog Division Drone Synth, which is actually named appropriately to describe exactly what it is. Let's walk through this device and explain its signal flow. There is a power button at the top as well as a tempo control. It has 3 oscillators, each one with a volume knob, pitch control, and pulse rate adjustment. It's set up very nicely where each oscillator has its own row. The pulse width adjustment of each oscillator is an interesting feature on this device, as each one has a different fraction interval to control the rate of its oscillator. The first one is whole and half notes. The second one is half and quarter notes. The third one is quarter and eighth notes. The oscillators are then routed into a low-pass filter. Lastly, there is a main output which has its own volume control. It's set up very cleverly with these different division intervals which create interesting rhythm combinations. This device could again be a sound device source for sampling or accompaniment to a touring musician. Now, on that note, you may have noticed that the synth is not in a metal enclosure like the others. That's because it's actually a special edition PCB enclosure version of this circuit. So it comes in this cool and affordable housing, and it's a bargain for this little analog synth rhythm device. The Drone Tone is another interesting sound generating device. This again is an analog synth drone pedal, but with a different interface and features. Like the Analog Kick Drum, it too has a trigger input and 1/4 inch pass-through input. It also has a tap tempo, which will help you set the rate of the oscillator, and it also has a bypass switch. It has pitch control and rate control knobs, as well as tone and volume controls. This pedal can be used in line with the rest of your pedal board and provide accompaniment to a guitar or other instrument, or it can be used standalone. Again, another interesting simple analog synth in pedal form, good for use in the studio or live performance. Next up is the WARBLE SWELL Echo pedal. This pedal is described as being an analog-voiced digital echo delay with a dynamic foot control of the swell feature and gooey tape-like modulation. This pedal is great to use with a guitar or other instrument. There is a handful of parameter controls including time, repeats, warble rate, warble, swell, and swell onset. The LEDs indicate pedal engagement or bypass and the swell rate. Let's take a look at what this pedal can do.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Lastly, we're going to look at the air trash. Here's the official description from Mattoverse. The air trash is a pedal for guitar and bass that sounds like absolute garbage. Well, what more can we say? Yes, the blue knob is the volume output. Meanwhile, the red and yellow knobs have foregone verbal descriptors and instead opted for symbols, so let's see what they do. Alright folks, you've been great. We appreciate your support. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a comment below if you support independent inventors and businesses. Thank you.